wouldn't correspond. Yeah, I think you don't want to, right? You don't want to be involved in it. So then, that's the other two that are supported.
What do you want me to say? Check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Make sure that this speaker works.
So we can hear them.
I'm sorry. Say Tony texted
Cool.
us. Say Tony texted us. I would have said please. She'll get a kick out of it.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, it's
Nice.
that time. Tony, how are you?
Doing good. Jeffrey, how we doing?
Doing pretty well, thank you. Probably should have.
I do want to warn you. She said sorry, she's already here.
You guys getting some feedback?
I can't hear you. There's too much feedback.
Can you hear it? We're good?
There's a little bit of feedback.
Josh, can you hear that? We're getting a little feedback. How's that?
Oh.
Can you hear any feedback now?
Cool. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September 13th Rossmoor Community Services District Board meeting. And hope you all are doing well and have stayed relatively cool over the last week or so. If we can get a roll call, Mr. Mendoza?
Yes, sir. Director Barkey?
Here.
Director DeMarco?
Here.
Director Nidickman is absent. Director Ciros?
Here.
And President Rips.
Here. Director Seals, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
Actually, inside this one, I can correct.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
From California Highway Patrol, Officer Musselman. Good evening. How are you doing today? Doing very well, thank you. Jeffrey? Well, thank you.
Good evening, Board. Mr. Mendoza. As always, I'll start with our statistics. So far, the third quarter to date, we've had 4 traffic collisions, 2 in July, 1 in August, and 1 so far this month in September. We had one was uncontrolled or semi-uncontrolled intersection. The other one was an unsafe start, and the other one was an unsafe turning movement, and all 3 of those were property damage only. For our ticket stats, unfortunately, they were extremely low so far this quarter. There was only 2 written, explained before in previous meetings. When we are very low, they pull me from my specialized position in Rossmoor or Midway City or what have you, so I could work the freeways. I was off on vacation, fortunately, all of August. And so far this month in September, I've only been able to work my specialized position 1 time. So due to those circumstances, there was only 2 citations written in Rossmoor so far this quarter. I'm hoping by the fall Our staffing levels will improve. We are supposed to get a couple
Can I
officers.
ask you just to pause
Yes.
for a moment? I apologize. Did we lose Zoom?
I can hear you.
You could still hear? Okay, all right, thank you.
And so that will increase our numbers for the regular freeway beats, and I'll be able to maintain my specialized position in Rossmoor, Midwest City, unincorporated areas, and Anaheim. So those are for these stats. Does anybody have any questions?
You were working on getting a reserve program up and running. How was
Correct.
that? How's that going?
Perfect, thank you for that question. We currently have 5 senior volunteers. They've just finished their academy, 3-day academy at our office. They are all local, so they will not be coming from far away, so they will be here hopefully Monday through Friday in the mornings and the afternoons. Their main focus per our captain will be to drive around and be a visible presence in unincorporated areas. So since all the schools in the Westminster area CHP office are in Rossmoor, the majority of the time they will be spending in the mornings and the afternoons as a visible presence in Rossmoor. Later on, when they get more training, they'll be able to deploy our radar trailer, and they'll be able to do more functions throughout the area once they have more training. They just started middle of last month, so, but they will have signs on the windows stating out of service or volunteers or what have you.
Gotcha.
So they know our brevity codes, they know certain things to do, they'll be able to put out traffic cones if there was an accident before the officers get there, so they will.
Do you have any update on like the e-bike enforcement, just basic activities that you're seeing?
I have no official update on the e-bike enforcement. I've been working with Mr. Mendoza. He and I have been talking about possibly me being able to cite local ordinances for e-bikes, especially like in Rush Park or any of the parks or what have you. I've reached out to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I unfortunately have not heard back from them yet, where I asked if I was able to write a local ordinance on their citations, due to the fact that the local, if I write it on my citation, it goes to the local on one of our state documents, which is a good deterrent, but is not an enforcement document. So as soon as I hear back from the Orange County Sheriff's Office, I'll update you to whether or not I'll be able to write that municipal code or any municipal codes on their documents, so it goes to their municipality.
Do you have any upcoming events with schools or any kind of education events? I know the one you did in May was extremely successful.
The bicycle rodeo?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. I can reach out to our PIO, Officer Mitch Smith. He's always working on, I know we have one in the different unincorporated area coming up soon. We have one coming up with to him, and then he could reach out to Mr. Mendoza, and we could hopefully get one on the books.
We'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hello, good evening. So Officer Musselman, we certainly thank you for, you've been very open with us over the last couple years. You've helped us with traffic on many of the streets. You've come in to our traffic meeting several times. Really appreciate that. I just want to ask a few questions. You don't handle parking per se, let's say on Wallingsford, when the like you don't write parking tickets, correct?
I can, yes.
Okay. So, so let's see, with school starting, okay, so my question, I guess, is, who makes that decision?
It's just a staffing decision.
But someone has to, like, do you have a captain above you? So who makes the deployment decision, whether you go to freeways and write traffic, tickets, or you come into an unincorporated area, and who makes the decision, and kind of where is it written of the jurisdiction? Because I'm very confused as to what the CHP is supposed to do in Rossmoor, what is even the sheriff supposed to do, because we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, tonight too. But school started. We have 4 elementary schools. It's gotten a little better, but for the first couple weeks, it was an absolute mess, okay? You had Wallingford, we had a traffic committee where, people were complaining, so I don't know if they got to the apartment complex on Wallingford to remind them they have to leave by 7 o'clock, but it was an absolute mess getting out of Rossmoor. It took like 15 minutes just to get that 3 blocks out of Rossmoor. I'm sure there were some violations around the schools too, in terms of, we like to see your presence, CHP presence around the schools. And I know historically, you or your predecessor would like to be there the first couple weeks of school just to keep, remind parents that, you know what, hey, you got to follow the rules. So I'm just, I'm concerned for my community's just deployment of you or an officer in Rossmoor, and I'm just wondering who we would talk to about making sure Rossmoor's not forgotten, okay? By the pandemic and stuff like that, or they're off or they're understaffed, but I don't know how many CHP officers there are in Orange County. I would imagine you could bring deployment over here if you're that vastly understaffed. So I'm looking for just like some answers as to who do we go to convince someone, you know what?
Well, answer would be Captain Sofa, the captain of the Westminster office.
Okay.
She, I would assume, would tell you exactly what I'm going to tell you now, is it's all based off staffing. So in 1970, there were 68 officers at the Westminster office. Today, we have 47 officers at our office. So that is 21 officers less than we had in 1970, 52 years ago.
Wow.
Exactly. So that's what we're dealing with, unfortunately. So their priority rests with, and I'm not taking anything away from Rossmoor, so please don't think that I am. The priority rests with the highway patrol or the freeways, and this has another officer that's like me. The only difference is the San Juan Capistrano office, like I mentioned before, I think last year, Coda de Casa. Coda de Casa created a contract with the highway patrol where an officer or officers go in at a 4-hour period on an overtime shift to enforce the law, whether that be parking, speeding, traffic collisions, whatever it may be. That's the only unincorporated area that I'm familiar with that officers are in there, not 24/7, but the better part of the day, pretty much every day on an overtime shift.
And Coda de Casa pays for that.
Correct. So I'm not familiar with the contract, I'm not familiar how many hours or what have you, but it is purely on overtime shifts.
So Officer Musselman,
Yes.
with the Sheriff's Department, I understand that it's the county that has a contract with the Sheriff's Department that dictates the rules of engagement, how often you're supposed to be in Rossmoor and what the role is, et cetera.
With how many hours we are supposed to be in an unincorporated area, but as a state officer, we do handle all unincorporated areas in the state.
So it's really a state mandate that says CHP handles unincorporated areas wherever they exist in California.
Traffic-related matters, correct, yes.
And then the local jurisdiction, in this case, Westminster, it would be the captain who determines how to deploy those resources.
Yes and no, that is correct. The vision, I don't know that answer.
Okay.
But whatever those numbers are, if we fall below those numbers, they take me, put me on a freeway beat. They take these specialized officers from inside our office doing special duty assignments, put them on the freeway as well to meet our minimum priorities. So unfortunately, the unincorporated areas do suffer somewhat when we do have a staffing shortage.
Right.
And it's just not the CHP, like you stated, it's all local jurisdictions that are facing a severe staffing shortage.
So traffic, for example, in Seal Beach or Los Alamitos is done by the Seal Beach Police Department and Los Alamitos Police Department.
Yes and no.
So Highway Patrol, though, doesn't go to Seal Beach and Los Al.
Yes and no. Since we are state police, if there are any major investigations that local jurisdictions don't feel comfortable investigating on their own, they call us, and we are, for the lack of a better word, mandated to take those traffic collisions, investigations, whatever they may be. So,
And so the CHP, though, doesn't get funding from the county
No.
to provide services. This all comes from California.
correct.
The California budget that we have some ginormous surplus, but we can't seem to fund enough officers.
Correct. Well, the funding for us comes from the vehicle license fees for the registrations.
Gotcha. Okay. Is that down, those numbers?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Go over the numbers, 1970 and today, in terms of,
1970, we have a sick leave. That may be off one or two, but that's what we have today, staffing-wise.
In the Westminster office?
Correct.
Yeah. What would it cost to hire a CHP officer?
I have no idea. I can't answer that.
Check with Kodo.
That's true. That is very true. I know our overtime rates do go up every single year. 4 or 5 years ago, when I was inside the San Jose office, the rates were roughly $110 an hour for an officer.
a lot cheaper than an attorney. Since our attorney's not here.
I just wanted to circle back to the e-bikes just for a moment. And what are there, I guess, guidelines that they have to follow on the streets that are different than just a regular bicycle? I mean, they're same.
Yes, they're the exact same rules and regulations as regular bicycles. So regular bicycles have to stop at all stop signs. They have to abide by turning movements. They have to abide by speeding. Obviously, the e-bikes can go faster than most regular bikes. So the speeding can come into play, but the majority of the traffic running the stop sign, running the intersections. Every single child or person I saw do that, I stopped, tried to educate them. I believe in educating the younger people first, then taking enforcement action. If I need to, that would be my second choice.
How would you enforce that? Do you take them home and tell their parents? Do you write them a ticket?
No, I would write them a ticket. Yes. So we have helmet violations, crossing the not crossing at the crosswalk, going through the stop signs, any types of those violations.
And the helmet, are they required to have it strapped on as
Correct.
opposed to just?
16 or below. Age 16 or below.
Shoes required? Shoes?
I don't know if that's a
that a
vehicle violation. It makes sense, yes.
I'm just curious.
But they have to wear a helmet, but does the helmet have to be strapped on?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Properly fitting helmet, correct.
Okay.
The majority of them, when I see them, they have them strapped to their handlebars, have them strapped to their
Right.
backpacks. So I'm assuming when they're leaving the house, it's on.
Sometimes I see it on but not strapped on,
Yes,
so.
it's supposed to be
you-
strapped, just
you
like a
fall- you
motorcycle
fall with
helmet,
that,
a helmet
yeah.
or what have you, yes.
And just out of curiosity, are bicycles and e-bikes 2, 3, 4 side by side riding down the street? Are there, not going to say you're going to stop everybody from doing that, but is that okay, or is that a violation, or?
Well, in Rossmoor, in a lot of residential streets, you have those signs in the middle of the street saying bicycles are okay down the street. So bicycles are okay as long as they're not doing anything reckless or what have you. If they are impeding traffic, if they're going 2 miles an hour, that potentially could be a violation. But you see people, I'm assuming, walking in the middle of the streets. For whatever reason, they don't utilize the sidewalks.
Right.
When that does happen, I stop them and I ask them questions. Why are you walking in the middle of the street when you have a perfectly good sidewalk right here? 90% of the answer is the asphalt's softer on their knees.
That's right.
So that's the answer I get. It's a residential area. I could just advise them that most people are on their cell phones. They're not paying attention. You could be severely hurt. And they're okay, thank you. Have a good day. Okay. So that's unfortunately what I'm up against when I'm in Rossmoor a lot of the time.
Well, thank you for all you do, although we appreciate the fact that you had a lot of vacation time. We're happy you're back.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. It's good to be back.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. There are no additions to the agenda. We're moving on to public forum. So any person may address the Board of Directors at this time on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Rossmoor Community Services District. However, any matter that requires action may be referred to staff at the discretion of the board for report and an action at a subsequent board meeting. Public forum is for non-agenda items. Therefore, if you are here to make comments on an item that's on the agenda, tonight's agenda, the appropriate time for those comments will be when the item is taken. Now speakers are invited to address the board on the non-agenda items. Please state your name clearly and your place of residence. Also, please speak directly into the microphone so not only we, have that correctly?
Georgia.
George Lee?
Georgia.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll hold this for you.
At our last, I don't even have a place to hang that. But he said, there's a package outside for you. And I said, but I didn't order it like the 9x12, but bigger.
Okay.
It's great. All you folks, all of Rossmoor has done best 50 years of my life. Really good. Jessie the other day, and I said, should I bring it? And she said, oh yeah.
All right.
Maureen Waters. I want to say that I heard through the grapevine at the high school that included a lot of topics. One was e-bikes instead of so cool. They're trying. Also, another thing about pickleball. I'm still in favor of having pickleball in Rossmoor. The main thing I'm talking about this, the wife was home and the criminals did not enter because she screamed. And I learned that it almost took 50 minutes for the sheriffs to respond to the 911 event in Rossmoor. He has never directly answered the question. In fact, around in circles. My answer to that question is yes. Has the sergeant, captain, I knew it was something more than officer, thank you. What happens if the sheriff gets called as backup to Midway City in slow response time? What is being done about this?
Thank you. Carol Churchill? I know you're going to wait till the agenda item? Okay, great. Thank you. RHA? Marion, Joe, Kevin, et al. Gifts are good.
Good evening, everyone. Before we do have a presentation. Origin could come up if she wants, but RHA would like to thank you guys. But before we do that presentation, I just wanted to make one comment regarding the CHP. Last week we had a tree that fell down, and it was in front of Rona Goldberg's house. And I thank Joe Mendoza for giving the numbers that we can share with our residents who to contact. An Orange County tree, emergency tree system was very effective and responded. But then I said, we really need sheriffs or CHP here because the tree is completely consuming any access in and out, and it's a dangerous thing. We're right off of Rowena and St. Cloud. And so I called the Sheriff's Department, and the Sheriff's Department said, that's not within our jurisdiction, that's the CHP. And then the CHP said, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to let dispatch know anyway. And so did roll out a cruiser, and a cruiser was there within a half hour to help in terms of public safety, in terms who has the jurisdiction. It all worked out nicely, but anyway, just a little commercial. As the RHA Emeritus Board, lifetime Emeritus Board member, the first ever since the history of by George Lynn and what she's contributed to our community. And I think we're going to continue doing that, and probably till we beat it to have a 65 anniversary t-shirt that we had created. Do you want to cut this off and then make a little V-neck? But we want to thank them, and we really appreciate that opportunity to be able to continue with that. So with that in mind, little buff pup. We'll leave this with Joe so that if you do need another size, just contact us. We'll be more than we'll deliver. We'll exchange them out and deliver.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, directors. Thank you for allowing me to have this time. I just want to go over a couple of things really quick here. Coming up, take note, please, September 21st. We appreciate anybody that can come out and support. It's always a great thing. We're having our heroes. It's great. We also have, I don't know if you guys have heard, RHA has been doing the teacher appreciation, take them Nick's burritos. Who doesn't like those, right? Got to tell you, the teachers really like them. So we take them to every single one of the schools and just have they all look forward to it. It's a great time, and they get a Nick's burrito. So that's going on right now throughout the schools. We do have our shredding event coming up, October 29th. Again, those are a huge hit. You guys probably see me out there every quarter doing the shredding events. Something that's coming up for us as well that is near and dear to my heart because I spent too many years to tell you doing this event of its kind in Orange County, period. I chimed out this year because I had to, can't do everything. So, but I just wanted to mention I do have the candidates night coming up, and I just would like to request, most appreciative if that is possible. Just putting it out there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other,
Anyone on Zoom that would like to speak to the board?
Maureen's reference to the video, backed up, climbed in our backyard, threw our couch up against the wall, which they've done multiple times, not only in our town, according to sheriffs, but also Newdow, which, since we don't have glass sensors, didn't set off the alarm. My wife happened to me 35 minutes to get there. She immediately called 911 right after she had called me, and arrived in a situation where my wife thought they're still in the house. She was on the phone with the 911 operator the whole time.
thank you.
And since Nebo, so if there's any update on this incident, can Joe?
Times with the sheriffs. I talked to a commander on the way in. The meeting tonight, future service. The bottom line is we know this, put at the forefront during these conversations, and there's an excuse, but there's no excuse. They're out.
I guess I'd like some clarification as to role, and we do have
Mutual aid.
I guess I'm disappointed with the sheriffs, but I'm also very.
And into that, for some reason, they didn't think that mutual aid was. Well, I believe
Mutual aid is for a disaster that requires extensive deployment, like riots, during whatever, a few summers ago, for example. So let's call Los Al or Seal Beach. And the question is, why couldn't they get here? Why did it take them 30, 45 minutes when, technically speaking, we're supposed to have a sheriff's deputy in Rossmoor most of the time, and if they're not here, they're right next door, et cetera. That's a question for the captain and his people to explain. And of course, their explanation is likely going to be something like, well, it just happens to be that at that moment, the deputy that was assigned to Rossmoor was deployed in name your unincorporated city because of something that was going on there. But we need an explanation. And most importantly, we need to know why this isn't going to happen. It's the county that has the stick, if you will, to say, you can't do this. And we've been asking now for a long time. I know Tony has sort of led this. What are the expectations? What can we expect from the Sheriff's Department? How many officers, how often, what's the coverage? If your officer does go to Midway, is anybody notified, like Seal Beach or Los Al, so we're not uncovered? And ultimately, that's what we need to know. There are other options for policing, by the way, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but there are other options. Like, would the county enter into a contract with the Los Al Police Department rather than the Sheriff's Department because they're right next door and could provide better coverage? I don't know, but that's something that we need to consider, and we need to have a conversation with our supervisor, not just with the Sheriff's Department.
all those calls have been made, and we're asking those questions.
Yeah, I agree. It's, I don't see it getting better. We have Officer Musselman telling us they're way down. You know, we had school starting, like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, no deployment for CHP. They're usually always there for the first week of school. I think the community, I mean, a city would know this, but I think any community has a right to ask what their coverage is. And so for the month of, I don't know, August, how many hours did we not have a sheriff's deputy in here? I think that's just, and it is what it is, and then we find out, but our captain is telling us that information is very hard to get, or he can't get it. So I think that while we're collecting information, I mean, I think it's rather important to have this discussion sooner rather than later, so we don't have any more of these incidences, because, you know, the bad people in the world know this, okay?
And Joe, I'd even suggest, let's go ahead and reach out to Sheriff Barnes. He's in charge of the Sheriff's Department, and let's ask him to help us from a 30,000-foot view to understand and to problem solve here.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. Any other comments, either in the room or via Zoom? Okay.
Anyone on Zoom want to speak?
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to reports to the board. First is a quarterly tree report.
Good evening. I'm here to give the quarterly tree report. It's actually for the months of May through August, so it's for those 4 months. During those months that are warm summer months, we try not to trim trees unless absolutely necessary. It's when the trees are growing, they're the most active, and also we want to protect the birds in the trees. That's actually going in line with the federal wildlife law that protects birds in the trees. So during the months of May through August, we did need to prune 18 trees in total. Orange County Public Works helped out with 10 of those, and 8 were pruned through our contractor, WCA. There were 38 trees that needed to be removed because they were either dead or hazardous trees. When authorized trimming or removal citation was issued to a property owner, and there were a total of 28 limb failures that occurred during this period, none resulting in property damage or injury. And a total of 171 resident service requests were responded to. Grid trimming started on August 30th for the south end of Rossmoor, and they're making good timing with that. They've already done all the trees from Gertrude along Martha Ann, from Gertrude to Druid, and they've done Yellowtail, and I believe they're on Rowena and Druid, those trees right now running east-west through Rossmoor, and that should, when that concludes, we'll also have some supplemental trimming and other grids to address issues such as clearance or dead limbs or trees that just are a little bit too heavy. The free mulch yard at Kempton has proved to be very popular, and I've had the pleasure of manning it a couple of Saturdays, and it's a really great thing to see, to be able to interact with the residents and to see the residents come together, and they usually have conversations, they're talking to each other, meeting. I think it's just a really great thing, and the mulch is provided by West Coast Arborist, our contract arborist, and the use of the yard has been made available to us by Golden State Water, so we want to thank them for that contribution. On the outer brick wall at Montecito Center, and the mural's design would be chosen by way of a community design contest, and the winning design would be executed by a professional mural artist with the help of community volunteers. And that's the end of my report. If you have any questions, thanks.
Mary, with the recommendations / mandates for how we are supposed to water or not water, what happens to the trees that are in the parkway?
Yeah, that's a great point. The trees are suffering with, I can already see, with the lack of water.
So I guess it's not a mandate, it's just a recommendation.
Should not apply to trees.
So the trees that are in the parkway, we still should be watering them regularly.
Yeah, if the trees start dying, we're going to be in even worse shape. So we really need to keep our trees alive. We want that canopy cover in Rossmoor, keeps the city cooler. And even if you're worried about using too much water, leftover water from your, if you're filling up your sink, or if you're waiting for the water to get hot, you can go get a bucket and pour that in. The most important thing is to not let it run off. So if you can put the hose, get a hose out there, put it on a real slow drip so it doesn't just run off into the gutter or the sidewalk. Let it permeate into the soil, and so that the roots, and you want to do that under the drip line of the tree where the canopy extends out to.
How often?
Not near the trunk.
How often?
If you can do it in the summer months, once a week would be great. Twice a month is okay, but at least twice a month during these summer months would really help the trees. And also depending on the species, some are more drought tolerant. Some of the southwestern Australian varieties are definitely more tolerant. Some of the native varieties, we don't really have a lot of the native varieties for California that we plant. But
Are you seeing issues with the parkway trees right now?
Definitely seeing issues, and some of the trees that are already at risk because they're being attacked by pests and disease, if they're already not healthy, and then they're also not getting water, then they're going to succumb even more quickly to those pathogens and pests.
So obviously Rossmoor is known for their trees. Is there a way, Joe, that we can educate the residents to, even though they're cutting back on watering their lawn and so forth, that they shouldn't cut back on watering their parkway trees?
Yeah, I did have a door hanger during the last drought that I would put on doors of houses where a tree was not being watered, just to educate people. So
can we do that again?
Yeah, we can definitely get that printed again, and have me and the tree staff out there doing that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Are you noticing more limbs that are falling because of this?
We usually have during the summer limbs fall, and it's called summer branch drop, and it has to do with the heat and water rising up through the trees. It doesn't seem any worse so far this year, but during the heat, it doesn't matter, if what year it is. It seems like on hot days we have a lot of limbs fall, no matter what. So.
As for the resident refusals, that number's pretty much the same as it's been for the last couple of quarters and years. Is that about right?
I'm sorry, what is it?
The resident refusals for vacant locations in the parkways?
Yeah, that tends to not change too much. I'm usually each planning season able to convince a couple of people that are very adamant about not planting. But then we remove trees, and then there's a new crop that also refuses, or they put in hardscape or artificial turf that, our contractors won't cut out turf in order to plant a tree. That wouldn't be part of their scope of services. So that's a problem too, when people landscape their parkway or hardscape it in a way that we can't plant a tree. So, and that would go back to code enforcement. Get with them and definitely say we want to pursue those cases that are that people want, people that want trees. Right. That I could go and look into doing those parkways. It is, a priority of mine to get those trees planted in vacant parkways.
Do you have the necessary budget for more trees?
We have a good budget for trees, and also because we do water the new trees, we don't want too many trees planted at once because we run into the issue of caring for them all at once too. So we do water, and the lawn irrigation just isn't enough, so that's why we go the water truck and water the trees, because we want those trees to survive. It's such an investment for the RCSD. So we want the trees to survive, and whatever that takes, if we have to go out and do supplemental watering. So too many trees planted at once would be hard for us, and plus with the water restrictions too, to do all that watering.
When do you plant in November? Is that about right?
I usually start, the earliest is October and runs through February. Sometimes it will run a little later, but no later than April.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
So I noticed that 175 trees are going to be planted this season. There's, from what you're just saying, that's manageable. I mean, that's a lot of trees, but 175 is manageable.
Yeah.
So there's more trees that can be planted than the 175? Like there's more open spaces that need trees?
Yeah, right now, I don't even have that many on the list, I don't believe, because I'm going off what was removed last season. We're also going to be still removing trees up until planting season, so that number could change.
Okay.
So I really don't know the total number until the cutoff for when the trees are removed and then the planting season starts.
But there's never a time where the folks, the 43 residents that don't want trees, where you have extra trees and nowhere to plant them, right?
No,
Okay.
never, yeah. It's always pretty much right.
Yeah.
And
So a couple come on, and then you talk a couple residents in every year, I'm imagining, right?
yes, or the house gets sold.
Oh,
and,
yes, that's always.
But, yeah, but it doesn't change much because, as I mentioned, with the, especially with the artificial turf, if it gets laid onto the entire parkway, there's not much we can do there.
Mary, could you, the thing that Director Barkey brought up about watering the trees, even though, we're in drought, that it's important to water our trees, could you write something in the newsletter and possibly write something for Mr. Mendoza to post on our social media, maybe even on our website, and then on social media, maybe do it in different ways to where every month it's a reminder to water the trees?
And could RHA put something out like that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just getting not just one time, but with just this constant, hey, don't forget to water the parkway trees.
Yeah.
They really need it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would,
All right.
I would be very happy to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Mendoza, next item is pickleball.
Yeah, before I move on, we have a special guest with us tonight, a super sub for Tarquin, or Kim Barlow. Just want to welcome her.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for being here tonight.
And want to thank Mary for her presentation. And we had a couple of emergencies this week, and I feel really bad about this, but I had planned to recognize her tonight and didn't have the time to do it the right way. But this is Mary's 10-year anniversary.
Awesome.
And I'm telling you, I hear a lot of compliments about Mary in our community. Mary, a lot of people speak highly of you, as do I.
Nice.
Georgia Lynn's tree that Mary planted a while back, looking very nice. Anyway, moving on, thank you. Update regarding potential pickleball program. As you know, this is hot on our to-do list, and on August 9th, the board of directors met again with residents and spoke about pickleball. The directive was to meet with our Parks and Facilities Committee, and that happened on August 25th. And in that meeting, we discussed a number of things, and I'll just go down the PowerPoint real fast. One is, pickleball is offered on a trial basis July 27th through the 30th. We We recorded a number of items and data regarding parking, noise, general park attendance, court usage, and post-trial and numbers to compare against, and we presented that to the board, to the committee. As a result, they want us to knowing where and formulating a plan to engage residents in the process. Whether a negative declaration would be warranted, and those phone calls are being made with different entities to see how much that would cost, and if that would be something that we want to move forward with, and that will be reviewed on September 20th with our Parks and Facilities Committee. Scheduling community stakeholder forums, consideration of a trial pickleball program with implementation of noise mitigation, and just to move forward with that, I'm touring facilities this week, different cities, and taking a look at that. If you read the paper recently, City of Long Beach has done a large study on pickleball. They're adding a number of courts throughout Long Beach, and in that process, they come up with how much it would cost to build a pickleball court, to transition a tennis court to a pickleball court, and those numbers coincide with what the research we have. Current use of tennis courts and scheduling. As you know, we have 2 professional tennis coaches out there. One of them, which I hope to honor at our next meeting, has let us know he's retiring. And he's been here 30 plus years. And I have pictures of him when he was a young man and now, and it still looks great. But Fernando has been a cornerstone of the tennis courts over there, and we look forward to wishing him a good retirement. And he's moving out of state, and he's looking forward to his new career ahead of him. And I think tennis is involved in that somewhere, wherever he goes. Anyway, so that throws a whole different wrench in the system, because that leaves us with one pro, and so scheduling and looking at future use of courts and things like that will be part of that. As the board is aware, the public comments at the last few meetings there are proponents and opponents, and therefore we need to review and study this very extensively. The impact of the tennis players, the availability of courts, scheduling of tennis pro lessons, impact on parking, cost of converting, which I talked about, cost to build new pickleball courts, costs associated with hiring a consultant to prepare a negative deck, and noise level and impact surrounding homes. So with all that, I just want to let you know we're on the move. We do have another study session coming up September 20th, and we will make a plan to bring to the board in October. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And just for clarification, that's September 20th at 8 a.m.
I would just ask that the committee now comment on what was discussed and what you guys think.
Alrighty. Well, unfortunately, we didn't have great attendance, and we'll work on scheduling similar as we did recently. What did we have? We had a evening session present. We're split. It's fact gathering still. That's really the issue, and understanding from a pickleball player's perspective, what do they need, understanding, and so we need to gather that information. Joe, as he said, was going to go out and tour some to understand what the community wants, and we're going to need to know how much it's going to be to understand if the community is interested in spending, a much larger amount of money to build a new facility versus a conversion. Conversion is going to be cheaper, and if we're going to convert
And looking at multiple products. I think Mr. Mendoza had a product that he showed at that meeting, but also was looking at other. Can you not hear me? Mr. Mendoza showed us a product for sound mitigation, but he also was doing research on other products as well. And I think Nathan said it. I mean, we are trying to figure out what long-term, right? How much money do we want to invest as a community to potentially build new courts, or how much do we want to invest in converting courts, or do we want to invest in converting courts that can be transitioned into permanent courts. And so how are we utilizing our resources, our funds, in the best possible way, long-term?
Do you ever see pickleball being in Rossmoor?
Me personally? Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's part of
So
our future.
my fear is that we're going to be, just like I said last month, that we're just going to be pushing this along, and it's going to take a few years, okay? And when all, again, other than the folks across from Rossmoor, who actually approve of pickleball, they just don't want it at Rossmoor Park. And I respect that. So again, as the only director that went down there at our trial, okay, to me, there was no parking issue. There was plenty of parking around the park. There's only 4 courts, so there's only 16 people there potentially playing at any time. Maybe at the peak there's, you know, I don't know, another 8 there. I would say a lot of people walk or ride their bike. So it's, to me, it's not a big, I didn't see a big impact in terms of parking. So the noise, I don't think spending, and I think the number was $20,000 just to hang some, I don't know, space age, or whatever the material is. You know, maybe there's another, you know, sound mitigator that is out there. But again, I don't want to wait a year to find that sound mitigator. I think a lot of the community residents want to play pickleball. You know, so I was at Lexington Park last week. Now again, they don't have houses around there. They just have horses from the track. But, you know, their court is, they have a schedule, and it's basketball a couple days, volleyball a couple days, and pickleball a couple days, and they just have different lines. So certainly our existing concrete tennis court can be converted and used multiple ways. I have every bit of faith that Mr. Mendoza can set up a program to do all of this. I see this going a long time. Again, we can talk about this for a couple years in terms of making a pickleball stadium at Rush or Rossmoor Park. I understand that's a lot, that's a big process, but converting one court, I don't feel it should be that big of a process to do. So I don't know.
Couldn't we simply use the pickleball court at Rossmoor Park on a limited basis, like 3 days a week, including one weekend day, and limit the hours maybe so it's not early morning if there's some noise concerns, and do that for a while and just see how it works so we can allow pickleballers to do their thing, give deference to those around the park where we're not doing it 7 days a week while we continue to study the issue?
Well, to respond, I think to both of your comments is, you know, one, parking wasn't seen as an issue. Chris had done a great job of counting cars and understanding the parking usage, and it didn't change whether it was tennis or pickleball. And generally speaking, it actually, I believe, if I remember right, there was actually lower usage of the parking sometimes when pickleball was taking place, even though the number of players was higher.
Right.
So there was a reverse correlation to that. As far as the timing, no, I don't want to drag it out either. I think our question kind of put to us from the last meeting was to understand what are the, you know, as Joe listed them, the factors we're looking at. And I think noise is the one which we would address, and we want to know as quick as possible what are the feasible alternatives. So if it's this one space age product, how much is that going to be? If it's another product that we can find now and we could use it, fine. You know, we discussed whether one was usable in a transferable way, right? If it's put on a fence and then we build a facility later and we want to reuse those panels without losing all that capital, then that would be worth considering. Or if it's a certain price and it's fairly disposable, then maybe that's what we want. We want to start with that now. But we kind of just wanted to, you know, go with an actual getting the list. And our meeting was very helpful with that. But Joe doesn't have enough information yet on the cost of those noise mitigation items. And I think that's the one thing that kind of holds it up. As Director or President Rips said, and I agree, and I said it during the meeting, was that pickleball isn't a want any more than tennis is a need. Like we somehow have this kind of belief that tennis is entitled to be present while pickleball isn't. Well, we're not chartered as a tennis community, so if the community wants pickleball, then we should give it the same kind of status. And so I want to see pickleball soon too, but I thought kind of the direction from the board was, let's find a way, if we can avoid, you know, frustration in the community, to do it right, you know, as soon as possible. But, you know, no, not to drag our feet, because, you know, a capital improvement is way too long out there if it gets dragged along for no reason. So
Wouldn't a reasonable compromise be to just allow it with limited hours a few days a week while we continue to investigate?
I'm okay with that, except that the issue I would see with that is, I don't know how we can say when there's a good hour of the day if it's a noise issue. It's sincerely a noise issue because we're working from home. There's not an hour of the day in which it wouldn't be disruptive to the neighbors across the street who say that it's disrupting. One of our doctors said, I'm just trying to say there's not. This is why the issue of timing isn't great. You know, but at the same point, we also have issues that there isn't any understanding, you know, professionally about ambient noise, right? I think what we hear in our perception of noise, you know, we're guessing at that right now. And I think some people overestimate ambient noise, and I think some people are very sensitive to it. If you hear it regularly, you'll become desensitized to it, right? And I think that's going to be a good thing, is that they won't notice the noise of pickleball after a while because they get desensitized.
I don't know whether they will or won't. You walk over to around Hopkinson during a busy time, and the noise from the traffic is overwhelming. Now it's not going to be that way with pickleball. We know that our residents want pickleball. There's a lot of people that play it and want to play it. We know there's some concerns about noise. I get it. And so let's assume Joe investigates the various noise mitigation products and comes up with one that's reasonably priced and maybe even transportable. Are we then ready to move forward and put these things up and institute pickleball?
I would be okay to present it to the board, and the board would discuss and take a vote, and that would be, I think that's our purpose, yes.
I think we should narrow this down to existing for right now. I mean, we don't have to stop talking about a large capital improvement to put a court at Rush. We can still continue that, but we already have slabs of concrete. We're, you know, about to lose. When's Fernando's going to leave?
November.
So I think the need and the will of the community is they want pickleball. They want to be able to play pickleball. And, you know, even the folks that live across the street have a concern about sound. I get it, and we need to mitigate that. But that shouldn't take months and months. It should be, you know, we got a bid, or Joe, you called, you said you got it's about 20,000 to get this super duper stuff. I don't know, how long is it gonna, when could you give us an answer as to what you think is, you know, hey, we pay 20,000, we can mitigate one court, okay, or there's another solution and it's 10,000, right? When can we have that information?
I'm targeting our September meeting, the 20th, for the Parks and Facilities Committee. And I would hope that I have a good breakdown and we have a good grasp of what we can do now and what we can do in the future. So yeah, so a couple weeks.
Joe, sorry, when's the next pickleball trial, you said?
No, there's not a pickleball trial.
Oh.
The next Parks and Facility meeting
Oh,
to discuss
got it.
pickleball.
Okay.
And then from there, we need to plan some stakeholder meetings and.
Okay, so I think we need to be very careful about stakeholder meetings in terms of bringing one court activity to a tennis court here in Rossmoor, because we do not have stakeholder meetings when we want these big concerts out in Rush Park. So we have a lot of residents out here that may think, you know what, we can come in here and say, you know what, this is too loud, farmers market's too disrupted. So we should be very careful how this is not getting, in my opinion, this is not the issue with the sheriff's department not getting enough service, we need stakeholder meetings, or Montecito parking along Montecito, we need stakeholder meetings as to what we need to do next. This is an activity at our park. And yes, we need to listen to the residents around the park. And yes, we need to, I would say, mitigate the sound. Again, it sounded like a park the 2 days I was there. Okay, it just sounded like a park. It didn't sound like, oh, we have a brand new pickleball stadium out there now. It's the sounds of a park. You have people playing basketball, tennis. So I would, we have meetings every month. Our residents can come in and tell us their thoughts as to how we're doing. But I think once we figure out this sound barrier, that, in my opinion, we give it back to Joe Mendoza and say we want a pickleball schedule, okay? If, again, I gotta wait another month I still think we should still have pickleball there 2 days a week, something till, I don't know. Certainly during the hot part of the day, no one's gonna play tennis or pickleball, so I would say the ambient sound is less in the morning to where it's louder in the morning, but to say we can't make noise at the park because people are working in their house, that's a tough one for me. That's a tough one for me, because certainly the residents around Rush Park on a Saturday afternoon and evening, or Thursday afternoon and evening, can say the same thing here. So are we opening up a can of worms where we have this long drawn out thing for just an activity at a park? So just some thoughts to think about.
Just, Mr. Mendoza, for my clarification. So you present noise barrier options at the 20th, and the committee recommends one of those. Is that coming back to the board at that point?
Yes, sir.
To order and install whatever those things are? Is that going to be part of your presentation on the 20th?
That'll be part of the presentation, yes.
Joe, if you wanted to convert our basketball court to hard volleyball court, would you bring that to the board?
Yes, I would, yes.
Really?
Yeah. I wouldn't make that decision. I would make sure
All right.
the board would make that decision.
Well, and part of it also is that would be a monetary.
What, the volleyball?
Depends on how much it would cost to actually, if Mr. Mendoza only has a certain amount of financial flexibility within our regulations. So I hear you both, and I totally understand what you're saying. As I said, point blank, I do think pickleball is coming to our community, and I agree. I hope it's sooner rather than later. I think we just need to do it correctly, and I think I personally want to be sensitive to what I'm hearing from the neighbors. I don't want that to be the end-all be-all, and we're not moving forward because of that, but I do think that we have an opportunity to do things right, and if it's a sound barrier, noise reduction, noise mitigation, whatever term we want to use, I would like to be able to install that before we take that next step. And I would like to be able to, if we find something that works, that we can do that quickly. And so my personal goal would be that we have that recommendation back here, because it's gonna be a financial outlay, and the board will have to make that recommendation, make that, I guess, his determination.
So no pickleball until we get to that place.
I'm not prepared to vote yes on that if you're asking. I know Mr. Nidickman has his viewpoints and he's not here right now. And I think that we made a commitment to the people that were at the meeting that we would bring this back and continue the dialogue on September 20th. I personally play pickleball all the time. It might not be in Rossmoor, but it's pretty close and I enjoy the game. And so just because it's not right here in our backyard, which I hope happens soon, doesn't mean that we don't have the opportunity to play pickleball. And so I would encourage those who do like to play pickleball to please take advantage of the opportunities that are close to us, and we will continue moving forward as expeditiously as we possibly can to make sure that we can bring it here to our community in the right way.
So on September 20th, if there is, I don't know, a sense that we found a solution to mitigate the sound and we can hang it on the fences, am I hearing that you would be not opposed to having pickleball at one of those courts?
I'm not opposed to having pickleball at one of those courts. I just want it to be done in the correct way. And I think we have a responsibility, albeit a small amount of people perhaps, but if there's a concern presented to us and it's noise mitigation and we have a way to mitigate that noise or show that we're trying to mitigate that noise, I think we have the responsibility to do that. Now, Mr. Mendoza might bring stuff to us and it's cost prohibitive, I don't know. But that's where it comes back to the board and the board has to vote on it.
Is there a current prohibition from playing pickleball on the tennis courts?
I think the courts say tennis only. I think we had that conversation.
Do they say tennis only?
Yes.
Is that a policy of ours?
I don't know if it's a policy, it's a court rule. I don't know if I'd have to look at our policies. But I know it's a rule posted on the courts.
Can you discuss that too at the 20th, just to see if it's an actual written policy? Because that's going to have to, if we move forward with this, that would have to be changed, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Seal Beach changed their tennis center to
I know.
tennis and pickleball or whatever they're calling it now. So, yeah, I mean, we would clearly have to.
Yeah, we would also be addressing, hours of play because, we can't have the lights on at 9 o'clock and somebody playing pickleball. That's just going to lead to real problems. So there would be structure. I mean, I said that last meeting, this is not going to be a free-for-all situation. Even when we start, as soon as we do, there's still going to be rules about how pickleball is played on the one court or the two courts or whatever, how many courts we set up. There will be a setup so that pickleball is played where pickleball is played and tennis is played where tennis is played.
Joe, how late are the lights allowed to be used now for tennis?
We go to 9:15, I believe.
Is that self-imposed? We just decided this
Right.
9:15 is the.
Yeah. Part of the process will also be a survey. That'll be coming before the Parks and Facilities Committee on the 20th. We met with our committee, our ad hoc committee, made a number of notes, a number of changes. We want you to proof it and approve it to go out to the public. So that'll be part of the process, and pickleball will be part of that survey.
So when's that survey coming out?
Well, it'll be being brought before to the Parks and Facilities on September 20th for them to proof it and then bring it to the board.
I'm just trying to get a timeline in my head.
I get you.
Okay, I'm just trying to get, I know people want to know because people ask me. So I just want
It is
to,
our desire, it is my desire that we come back on the next board meeting with a recommendation.
okay,
That's my desire.
okay. So, and this is everything, the sound mitigation, whether there's a survey or not done at the time, or, but where you're going to recommend the sound mitigation, the survey, and any other things that need to be discussed to play pickleball on one of our tennis courts, or whatever the recommendation is. That's the plan.
It will, I mean, for me, and it might take some time, it might be a stepping in, but I think there's also how do we quantify it? How do we, I know other places charge to come on. I know that we're supposed to be charging. Do we do that with tennis? Like, should we have an attendant out there that's actually taking care of that so that we are taking care of Rossmoor in the way we should at the courts? I mean, there's a lot of things that go to it, but yes, the desire is to come here the next board meeting with a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, anybody else?
that's it.
All right. Anybody else out there? Okay. We are now moving on to traffic safety.
Thank you, President Rips, members of the board. We had a great traffic safety committee meeting. With us that evening was Ralph Bartabedian from RHA with Emily Nell. At-large member was Kevin Pierce. And our representatives off our board was Director DeMarco and Director Searles. We had a great meeting at Rossmoor Park. We had about 12 people in attendance, a lot of input. I gave a brief overview of some of the highlights we've already taken to increase traffic safety. One of them is the flashing lights on Montecito and St. Cloud that we were able to get the county to install. We're looking forward to working with them, adding some more throughout the district in the future. The other one was discussion with, of course, Officer Musselman, which he talked about earlier, on looking ahead and getting together with him and the school district and doing some educational programs. Of course, we're continuing to put signs up and try to educate our residents to slow down due to the school starting and the traffic that's coming through Rossmoor. The next item we discussed was the draft resolution to create a permit parking ordinance in RCSD. As you know, we don't have the jurisdiction to do that. The streets are owned by the county. Therefore, this was just a discussion. It's pie in the sky, but you never know what can happen once you get the ball rolling. As you know, the residents along Montecito corridor, across from the apartments, the townhomes, in both Rossmoor and Seal Beach are impacted by overflow parking at night and during the day. It's not a good situation because of the closure of the parking lot at Rossmoor Shops and the restriction they have put on no parking at night and made it a tollway zone. It's forced the residents within those complexes to park on our arterial streets. I counted one night up to, I think, a couple hundred or 125 to 175 cars. You can kind of pick them out since it ends halfway down the street. So you can tell where it starts and ends. So it is an issue. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some in-depth studying. And the committee decided, after a lot of discussion, a number of people in the audience gave great feedback, decided to request that the Orange County traffic engineer conduct a in-depth study. Now, they've done this before, but we're going to revisit it with Wei Zhu and her staff, and we're going to ask them to look at parking issues, red curbs, because there are visibility issues, because the cars parked so close to the both entry and exits of our community. You can't see when you pull out, and it's a safety issue. We're going to look at the red curves. We're going to look at homes along the arterial streets and across from the Rossmoor Shops, and we're going to ask them to do a speed study and also an impact study to those homes. So there is a lot of traffic going back and forth up and down those streets that they should be looking at and looking at the safety. A lot of the issues are also stopping and rolling red lights and stop signs. So there's a number of things that we're going to ask them to look at. So that's our next step. The committee also discussed developing a strategic plan that may include resident stakeholder meetings, surveys, consensus building to determine a timeline that will be part of the recommendation to the board in a future meeting. This will continue to be studied. I'm in the process of making appointments with traffic engineering, and I believe Ralph Bartabinian from RHA was going to help me with that, and we're going to be asking them to make a presentation not only to the traffic committee but to a future board meeting. So that began the process, and I'm sure Director Ciros and Director DeMarco can maybe give you some more information that I may have missed.
Joe, there are permit parking areas in Orange County, like Seal Beach, for example, has it. Have we asked our county supervisor permission to create a permitted system here in Rossmoor?
To my knowledge, there's not a parking permit process within an unincorporated district, and the proper procedure would go through the county, through the Public Works traffic engineer. Then, I believe after that study, if there was something to show the Board of Supervisors, that's when we would take on that role.
So are we doing that?
Yes, we're asking them to do a study first.
And is our supervisor aware of the problem and what we want to try to do to solve it?
Yes.
Because to say there isn't a problem and to study something that's inherently obvious to anybody that lives in the area is a waste of money. And I would like our supervisor to be involved, because to ask the county to do a study to show that there's no parking across from the apartments off of Montecito is a waste of money and a waste of time, while our own residents can't park in front of their own houses when they come home at night.
The difference is, Director Barkey, is the elected Supervisor Doe would rely on that study and then support the study. Okay, so that's the kind of the discussion that we were having in the meeting, that we need some type of just like this draft ordinance that we called it, which is just an idea, but it was put down on paper, and it got 12 residents there. We usually have 1 or 2. So just the curiosity factor, what's this parking, draft? And of course, the 12, we talked about a lot of traffic issues, right? So it wasn't just Montecito, but it was great having 12 residents there, and even a mom and her daughter from the Department of Parking. And the solution is really what the solution was, or one of the solutions is, just park in the shop's vacant parking lot. But no one is doing anything. The only ones that are impacted are the residents along Montecito in Rossmoor. That's the only impact, other than the residents of the condo that have to walk across the street instead of walking around. Because the condos don't have the capacity, they don't have enough parking spots. Many of the properties do, because there's several properties. But going to, and Mr. Vartabedian brought this up, going and having a traffic study for supervisors to rely on and then support is a better strategy.
Well, hopefully the traffic study shows us what we all know to be true.
And it should tell us what we all know, but again, there's a lot more involved, and I know that the traffic committee, we need to make a timeline on this. There needs to be a lot of community outreach. We need more supporters from the impacted area in Rossmoor to mobilize and get involved and kind of drive this, very similar to the driving force on 24-hour fitness. See consensus. Don't know how it's going to go, but I know we started with something really taken from Los Alamitos, because Los Alamitos has and it was very simple, and you have a permit parking area. We did have 12 residents there, and it was very, very positive. my hope is that we get parties talking about it. Pickleball to me is a lot easier than what we're about to take on Montecito, but.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
So just, we're also mindful, though, that Supervisor Doe, represents Seal Beach as well. Need to get 3 votes through, the Board of Supervisors, whichever 3 they might, through their colleagues.
Yeah.
And Supervisor Doe, I think December, when he was here.
Absolutely is.
Yes. So him and his staff know of the issue.
Movement. Maybe we'll put pickleball on Montecito right in the street. That'll slow traffic down. All right. I think we're moving on to street sweeping.
Yes, sir. President, reps and members of the board, as you recall, at our last meeting, the board discussed the issue regarding signage for the enforcement of street sweeping. And as you remember, the signage that is needed in order for the sheriffs to enforce street sweeping within our district is a large number of signs. I think it goes up to like 600 or something like that. And they want to do it in sections, in stages. At the meeting, we discussed if it's feasible for the district to ask that the signs be waived and therefore waive enforcement. I also have a call into Supervisor Doe's stagnant situation right here waiting for input. Bottom line is, that it's just so the public knows, and if we had proper, I guess, enforcement. As you know, and arbitrary. I mean, they come in whenever they want, maybe an hour. The rest of and we're not approaching on the street sweeper, and is I guess at a level where we would think that the stormwater runoff is being mitigated or not abiding by the law. That would not, right now, we just don't have an answer, and we'll have to wait. And as soon as I get one, I'll let you know.
I did speak to Mr. Preziosi about this issue and reviewed all the issues. It's my intent to, if we don't get an answer from County Council, then I think we might need to be a little more proactive this issue so we can get a response back to you.
Yeah, I think Joe articulated correctly. If we're going to have 450 signs in Rossmoor, and why should we have 450 signs? Right? And we've talked about this for like 6 months.
Yeah.
So, I know a truck in Rossmoor or an SUV in Rossmoor that has weeds growing underneath it, okay, which tells me that I don't see any tickets on it, which tells me it's parked there for weeks and weeks and weeks. So that's years and years, and that's not equal and fair, and it's the curb's not getting swept. So I don't know. It's a tough. What's the right move? Again, tonight we've talked about, because that's the sheriff's department parking. Okay, it doesn't have enough resources. Whatever the reason, we'll find out what the reason is. But is it 1 out of a million? Who knows? Okay, so let's get more information. Capacity, and doesn't have the personnel, and it's almost like I get the impression that I didn't say that, but it's so it would be nice to know for all of this patrolling, and I like Director Barkey's certainly reaching out to the sheriff, someone higher up that we talked to. I don't know. As it relates to, we've also, go ahead. Who are you again?
It's meant for many other issues, but contracting Los Alamitos to do our tickets, so maybe a discussion.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Carol,
First time here, so I'm a little bit nervous. I have prepared a letter that I'd like to read to you so I don't stumble on meeting. And I think a couple things that I've heard from you is that the sheriff, maybe you need a little bit more publicity directed directly at the sheriff himself. Public publicity, where you call a press conference and say, we're being ignored. We've had break-ins. 911 took 40 minutes to get here. That's not acceptable. We're considering asking the sheriff not to enforce or direct communication higher up. That's a side comment that I have beyond this traffic signage issue. States that the installation of signage is necessary for the sheriff to implement parking enforcement and parking citations. Rather than take steps to comply with the law, the board stated that the RCSD waiving signage, concluding that this would permanently suspend parking. The goal is stated to promote aesthetics. Here are my observations. The General Counsel has no authority or jurisdiction to waive signage. What the General Counsel said, there was an echo and back. I don't know who she spoke to. Is the Public Works Department going to go to the Board of Supervisors? Is the County Counsel, the lawyer who represents the sheriff and the supervisors, going to say, I'm telling my staff not to comply with the law? I mean, who is going to give the district permission not to comply with state law that since signs have to be posted if you're going to do street sweeping and issue parking tickets? Somebody's not going to be doing your job if you go down that track. The board should be mindful that the primary purpose of installing parking restriction signs for street sweeping is not to streets that results in the pollution of public beaches with trash, viruses, and bacteria must be removed from the path of the street sweeper. Or you're just throwing money down. That trash collection and street sweeping on the same days are incompatible. The cars and the cans block the path of the street sweeper. Sweeping purposes. And if you amend your trash collection contract so that trash is not picked up on the same day that you have, aesthetics is irrelevant in light of the potential for state and county laws. That's in your contract that you signed with the county when you undertook the obligation. So you need to get it done correctly. And that will prevent you from wasting money. It will also provide you may want to consider working with the supervisors as well as the sheriff's department to figure out a plan for installing those signs, because people want to obey the signs. They don't remember what day street sweeping is. I'm a law-abiding citizen. You put a street sweeping sign on, you perform the duties that you've been hired to do. Thank you for your time.
Mrs. Churchill? So, since we don't have the jurisdiction, well, first of all, let me ask.
For ticketing me for parking on a street, and I was trained to deal with people coming before the court with tickets. And I was the one that decided what the law is.
And didn't that cost us about $30,000 in legal fees?
I have no idea how much you paid.
But we
contract with the county agreeing to be bound to comply with all laws, which included posting signs before you have nothing further on that except to respond to your question.
But also from us, I'd like to steer clear of that type of conversation.
Before we switched, despite that, we have cars that don't park appropriately. And so whether we have 400 signs or the 30 or so signs that we have now that are or because they didn't know better, or because they didn't care, and were ticketed as a result of that. So the Sheriff's Department has told us vehicle code determines how many signs are necessary in our neighborhood. They can't enforce unless the signs are up. But even when the signs are up, they offer very limited enforcement. So the issue is, if we have sign blight in the neighborhood, but the Sheriff's Department can't enforce at a level that is reasonable to actually encourage people not to park where they're not supposed to, then putting 400 plus signs in our neighborhood really doesn't help. We already have evidence of that because that cleared the streets on a regular basis so the beaches and the gutters and so forth were protected. So follow the law, don't follow the law, signs or no signs. Without the Sheriff's Department's cooperation, it's really a moot point, and that's what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I think that brings me back to the initial comment that I made. In Signal Hill, when our police are in storage, does your sheriff do that? Can you make arrangements with your county supervisor to provide that after somebody maybe gets 3 street sweeping tickets, that their car is put in storage until they pay off the tickets?
I doubt it.
Maybe there's an enforcement mechanism that's available to you to deal with this.
Yeah, I don't think
opposed to
The biggest difference than what you just said is the city of Signal Hill. So you're comparing us to a city. We're not a city.
We don't have latent powers to enforce those rules.
Yeah.
And
we
you
don't hold
also
the,
don't have the power to ignore the law.
Who's ignoring the law?
When you ask the sheriff not to enforce parking restrictions that are put in place to allow street sweeping.
But they're not enforcing parking restrictions. So Director Barkey just said when we were legal, when it was a blanket street sweeping contract and we had adequate legal signs, they were not enforcing parking.
Well, I don't know what the fact situation is behind that.
Well, that's the facts.
You're just making a statement.
No, that's the truth. They don't, ideally what would happen is you'd have the Sheriff's Department following the street sweeping, and somebody that was in the way would get a ticket, and once the street sweeper goes by, if you then park there, obviously the streets are now clean, you wouldn't get a ticket, but that's not the way they enforce it. They arbitrarily come through, often independent of the street sweeper, and they will ticket even after the street sweeping has been through if a car is parked, and they don't go through the entire area. They'll pick and choose only for a small amount of time. It's very arbitrary the way they do that for their own reasons. And if they're gonna do that again with our opposite day street sweeping, and we're gonna be required to put sign blight in our neighborhood to get inconsistent enforcement, that there lies the problem.
Well, the bigger problem is that your county might get sued by the state for violating the Clean Water Act.
Or an individual resident.
And that's a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you for coming tonight and speaking. Thank you both for your questions. We're going to move on to our consent calendar at this point. It's item E on our agenda. Consent items are expected to be routine and non-controversial, to be acted upon at one time. So to have a motion to accept the consent calendar as is, there are 4 items on the calendar. Park usage agreements, and the hearing officer agreement.
Accept. That's the word I was thinking. I move to accept.
I'll second
consent.
that.
And we have opposed? Nobody. So consent calendar passes. Thank you very much. Professional consulting agreement, Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I want to make sure I'm on.
Yeah, you're on.
The, new proposal for a consultant to do our accounting and our financial activities. As you remember, in October 2020, we hired a consultant, the Poon Group, to take over our accounting practices through a professional service agreement. As a result, the Poon Group has been with us from 2020 to now. We gave them a 1-year extension. They were paid at a rate of $5,000 per month, $60,000 annually, and they kept our books and made sure all our reconciliations with the bank were up to date, and also provided assistance with our annual audit. The Poon Group is now up for renewal, and as a result, we went out and did a kind of an informal bid. We received a couple of quotes, and we met with the budget committee to review those quotes, and on August 31st, we recommended a professional contract with Mr. Mike Matsumoto and for his services through the CPA, and he's a CPA and attorney, and his organization is called the GFS. And Mike's here tonight. I'd like to introduce him and bring him up to the mic. I'm sorry to mess with your name, Mike, but I'd like to bring him up to the podium. GFS put a bid in for the rate of $6,000 per month, $72,000 a year, which is an increase in our budget, and I've made a recommendation to the board in this review that we freeze part of a part-time maintenance recreation position in order to make up that $10,000 or $12,000 increase, and that we utilize the excess funds to get us some summer help at 15 hours a week for 4 months in order to make sure that we're covered in the district with good maintenance and recreation opportunities. And then tonight Mike will answer any questions. Mike has extensive experience with the city of Cerritos, Artesia, Seal Beach, La Palma, which he's currently at right now, and I know he's on call on an as-needed basis in a number of agencies. So with that, I'd like to ask the board to move for approval and ask Mike any questions that you may have.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And you want me to start?
Sure, go ahead.
Can you just tell us a little bit about, I know you've worked for a lot of different communities. I'm just curious, I guess, how long you worked for those different communities, and was it a temporary assignment? Was it a long-term assignment that ended? Because there are many of them here, which looks great. I'm just curious if you could give us a background about those.
I can't give you a background on all of them because I don't recall. I think I've worked at over 40 agencies. Some of them I worked for the city of Malibu. I picked them up back in 1998, and they are still a client and have been continuously. And the city of La Palma has been a client since 1994, and they are still a client. Other clients, I've gone in and I've been there for maybe a year or two, trained some staff and moved on. It really varies by organization. Some people have new people and they need me to come in and train them. Some have been, the city of Lakewood hired me for implementing their Munis system. I came in, I've implemented Munis in probably 6 organizations, and maybe over a year, 14 months, and then I was done. And I trained the people who were there how to use it, and then I was off to another assignment.
How many communities are you currently working with?
That's difficult to say. On a weekly basis, the 2 cities right now that I'm working with virtually every week, but a number of them call me and like this, I don't want to name names, but one city said, hey, I need you to come in and do the budget. I did that, and then
Got it.
a couple of months later I was done. And I showed the staff there how to do it.
And you have the bandwidth to take on the robust community of Rossmoor?
Yes.
I see you've done some work for our sister cities of Los Al and Seal Beach. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, Los Alamitos, that was a client back in 1994 for about 15 to 20 years, something like that, and I don't remember when they ended, but they had a lot of turnover at their city, and I think they went through like 5 city managers in 4 years, and a lot of turnover, and then that was a good time to end the contract. The city of Seal Beach, we still do work for them, and mostly that is my wife. So I don't do that work, but she does that.
And Joe, I assume you checked with some of these cities, references and so forth?
Thoroughly, yes.
Okay.
How does the scope of work different between a Rossmoor and a Malibu?
Well, this one is considerably different. First of all, this is the only contract that I have where it's a fixed fee. Virtually every other client is on an hourly basis. So it would be $150 an hour and it's just however much time you need. But I think in Rossmoor, the last 2 years, the Poon Group had the fee limit on there. And so I talked to Joe about his needs, the check registers, the reviewing the receipts and doing the monthly bank reconciliations, the reports, the monthly financial reports to council, and the check registers and preparing the checks. And so looking at those services, I know how long those would take, and so I ran up my numbers and I said, well, this is kind of what I think that's going to take.
So
it is a lot different from. I'm not currently preparing checks at any current clients. My experience with check writing has typically been in implementing a new system. And so I would go in, I would help them figure out the process, and then I would train someone else to do that.
So it's for, I guess, transparency, I'm looking at your agreement that you had with Malibu. I don't know if it's the current one. This was in May of 2021, and not to exceed $46,500 for the annual. Are you saying that this position with Rossmoor is going to be that much more involved, that you have a higher rate?
In Malibu, it was really year-end closing. That's all it was. So there were many months I wouldn't go out there at all. And I also have the ability to remote in. So I haven't been out in Malibu for about 2 years, and it's all done remotely. So I can remote in on their computer and do everything as if I was there, see their files, and do whatever closing I need to do from home.
So I guess then I'm still looking for kind of an explanation of like what's the value, I mean, what's the $24,000, $26,000 difference between that Malibu contract and then Rossmoor? I mean, that's it's a substantial. I know you're talking about remotely, but how often are you going to be in the office here?
I believe the plan is typically Wednesdays I would be here, so it would be weekly.
And then, I mean, you talk about consulting and creating a check platform. Is that something that you're going to do, or you're going to do a service that will then have you coming back every year to do the same service rather than implementing something that we might be able to do ourselves?
I'm going to be providing the service. We're not implementing anything different. So this is a little different because I'm not providing the implementation service. I'm actually doing the work.
In your experience, is this, I mean, candidly, is this a poor idea for Rossmoor to not be requesting someone teach us how to do something ourselves versus paying you repeatedly to do it?
It depends on if you have a full workload. If you have enough work to keep somebody on full time, that would definitely be more cost effective. You could get someone at a substantially lower rate than me to do it. But you would also have them for more time. And so if you didn't have work for that person, then you'd be paying more money.
And you're familiar with the software that we have, the Black Mountain software?
I've never used Black Mountain software. I've used, I can't remember all the I believe you guys know how to use it, and so I would learn that system, and I've learned systems where no one at the city knows how that system works, because the first time I implemented a number of these systems, I had to figure out the system and then explain to everybody else how it works. So I'm a pretty quick study.
So how well do you know our operation in terms of accounting processes and what we do, budgeting, and I mean, how much information have you absorbed from how we do things here?
Not much. I worked at Moreland and Associates back when they were providing services for the Rossmoor CSA back in the 90s, but I was not actually out on site. There was someone who worked for me that was out at the site, but it was different software. I don't think Joe was at the district at that time. And I seem to remember it CSA as opposed to CS.
What do you think? And you can just guess. So you're coming in on Wednesdays, right?
Yes.
So let's just assume, how many hours do you think it's going to take to put into Rossmoor from what you're seeing the workload, what you're anticipating the workload? Like how many hours?
I'm thinking about an 8 to 10 hour day, typical on some of the other days, but generally it'll be that Wednesday. Yes.
Well, he'd also have to be cutting registered checks that our president signs twice a month. And you'd be probably doing that off-site, I would believe.
Well, does this have approval? Where is this going to be coded? That would be generally done by the part-time AP clerk.
So, Mr. Mendoza, help us out here in rationalizing this. So we're seeing $6,000 a month. What's the benefit in your opinion? What's your thought process?
I haven't backed into those numbers. I know that Director Cyril's asked about days and vacation days and other things that come up with a full-time employee. So my thought process, I believe that Mr. Matsumoto has, and that's what he gave his bid as.
It's not that far off.
It isn't?
It's $173 an hour if you do 8 hours a week times 52, and so that gives us the extra grade that we're not going to run over. So, at least from that perspective,
Yeah,
it's in the ballpark.
At 8 hours a day.
Be preparing our budgets and into the year and all of that on just coming in on a Wednesday?
Yes. I may end up, and I would anticipate that I'm not going to be working as late then. But overall, looking at the year-end on average, that's approximately what I was thinking.
Yeah. Fiscal year, end of the year.
Right.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, fiscal year, end of the year. Joe, are we all already
Matches with our rec desk, our reservation, and today we start our check scanner that we just put into effect. That's going directly to U.S. Bank.
By first, everything's in Black Mountain?
Yes.
Okay.
And it matches rec desk. So those account numbers that you see, we're going to be able to pull up a rec desk, okay, because they didn't merge.
President Rips, could you address?
He gave us a bid that was exceptionally high, like much higher than what he was viable. Was also either here or a little higher than what we're the right person and the right fit for the community. And so actually we thought two things. One is that we needed to move out for actually the community. So that was sort of the dual edge, like district.
Has the phone group been released from their contract?
No, their contract ends October, right?
October 8th.
Yeah, contract.
Was Black Mountain mentioned as a...
But it's, I mean, sure, somebody knew it, but my understanding of different software programs and different people's backgrounds, if you understand a software program in accounting, that you could learn others. And so it wasn't a concern, and you understand it, it's not a concern. At least it wasn't for us. reasonable questions, absolutely, but
And Joe, you recommending we approve this?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract.
I'll second.
is there any, I just have a question. We're approving the contract. I know you made other recommendations about how to make the budget, RCSD budget work, but that's not, that can be a separate conversation, correct? Motion?
President Rich, your discussion, you were involved in this,
Yes.
and to, other than what you just said.
So it was time to move on.
Yeah.
It is
Agreed.
past time to move on. And speaking to Mr. Mendoza over several months, and then also having to rely on him in terms of who he feels comfortable working with and bringing to the table, is a very strong recommendation to work with what's the GFS. And in our conversations, fiscally, it made sense from the others, but it seemed to marry. And I think that, for this transition, I think that, even though we're ready to move on from the Poon Group, I appreciate all that they've done when they came in and what they've done for us. And now it's time for us to move forward in another way and see where this progresses. I still think there's lots of conversations about what that looks like in totality, but I think that having another company come in and having this company come in makes sense for us now, so that we can actually look and see. I mean, who knows? Maybe 8 hours a week is too much coming the end of the year, right? And that's one of the things that we were looking at Black Mountain. So I don't know. I'm hoping that we have transparent, authentic conversations as we move forward, if we move forward with this, so that we can actually determine what our needs are for the future. But I think for me personally, and I believe from Mark, this is the right next step for us.
Mr. Matsumoto, I have one more question. I apologize. Do you work by yourself? Do you have any staff? How is your office set up?
Currently, I only have 2, me and my wife.
All right. Thank you.
Both licensed CPAs with extensive government experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. And that is something we talked about. That was actually our concern. That was, but he clearly can handle the cities, and the fact that he's with the cities and several for a very long time and continue to be with them, that spoke volumes to us. So, but that was something that we did talk about, because do we want the redundancy? Because that was something that seemed to be missing now. But yeah, that was more of a conversation than the Black Mountain piece. So if there's no other questions, so we'll we'll just take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know you did a lot of work on this, and it's taken us a while to get to this point. So I'll speak on behalf of Tony we're just happy to be taking this next step. So been many conversations about this time, so we appreciate it. I know you had other recommendations. Is that something that we have to vote on now to help with the budget? What's the process?
No, I can make that adjustment within the budget. I just wanted to let the board know that we looked ahead and that we will make sure that supplement covers the added cost, and that we're still able to operate at a high rate and keep our facilities in good shape.
Tarquin has reviewed this contract.
Yeah.
Tarquin has reviewed this
Yes,
contract.
sir. Yes, sir.
I know you just said it, but I just want to reiterate, right? So it is an open position. That doesn't mean it's not a needed position. So I just want to make sure that we're not taking from here to help over here. So.
If I see a need, I will come back to the board, but I can make this adjustment right now and make sure that we're covered. The position hasn't been filled for a few months now, and we're operating at full strength, and I will make sure that we use it where it fits the best, and that's the spring and summer.
Okay, well, I mean, that does make sense, and I do appreciate you looking at it from that overall fiscal responsibility of our budget, but I also want to make sure that we can run and that the district the way we should, and that you have the support that you need to, because we are asking you all the time to do more and have more programs and services. So you're
Thank
good.
you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I think we're now moving into general manager items.
Okay. President, rest members of the board, I will just go down my list here. We talked about Black Mountain. That has been instituted and installed. The banking check scanner, that's up and running. It's going to save us time and effort in getting to the bank and accounting and everything else. It's going to make it a little more streamlined. Ad hoc satisfaction survey, we met with the ad hoc committee and we made our notes. I'm having the survey tweaked. We're looking at different ways of putting it out to the public, and we will make sure that that's all part of the September 20th report to the Parks and Facilities Committee. Staff training, we were just recently trained on emergency preparedness and fire extinguisher safety. It was a 6-hour course here. A lot of fun, and we learned a lot. All this is being provided through our CJPIA Insurance Authority at no cost. Upcoming programs, can I get the flash drive up on the screen, please? Anyway, while they're doing that, the final RCSD special event is this coming Saturday, the Health and Wellness Fair. It'll be from noon to 7 p.m. It'll be topped off by a concert in the park. So that it's going to look much like our festivals, except it's going to be all health and wellness. There'll be people providing medical or supplements for your for your health. There'll be people doing aerobics, different types of exercises, and there will be different types of food groups and things like that will be available. So that's this Saturday, and then, like I said, it's going to be topped off with a concert. There's going to be some moon bounces for the kids and some entertainment, and we're looking forward to that. So yoga, meditation, dance, food trucks, but all the food trucks will be healthy, so don't be disappointed.
You were able to find
food
trucks?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's the Health and Wellness Festival flyer, and we do have a number of groups, and we have a number of residents that are coming out providing booths that are going to be providing information and other items for sale. Okay, next. And then the next one is our Heroes Lunch that was brought up. It's this Thursday. I think the availability-wise, our Director Sherrills is going to be in attendance, and that's going to be a great honor for those people that are keeping us safe and protected. The other one is, Josh, where are you? As you know, we upgraded the irrigation system at Rossmoor Park, and here too. And you can see a change here, but at Rossmoor we took it a step farther because the wear and tear, and we saw each summer we saw areas that were in really need of attention, and it was either through soils reports that we obtained, and we added some minerals and things like that that was recommended, and we reseeded, we aerated, we fertilized, and as you can see, that's the result. And I think you could probably tell us more than anybody else, Mr. Mark, what a transformation that is, because I remember you walking across the field to play pickleball during that trial run a couple of weeks ago, and it was terrible. It was muddy, it was nasty, and so what we did was we changed the time, we changed the controllers. So before we had I didn't realize this a couple of years ago, before we had these controllers that if you turned the controller on and you timed it, about 7-10 minutes, it's hitting the whole park. So there's areas that didn't need 7 to 10 minutes or 8-12 minutes, but we didn't have the capability to isolate. So we bought some new controllers, a couple grand, put them in, and now we can isolate certain areas that we really want to pay attention to, and just like your yard. but I didn't realize we were in an old system here until I started asking the right questions, and we did that. Next, Omero did a great job here. We ordered sand. We brought it back up to a safe level. As you know, if sand's annually, we do this, and it's a big job. And he did it in the heat. And we brought in sand. We moved some sand from the sand volleyball area on the volleyball area. It wasn't the proper sand to play volleyball because it was too harsh. And when you went down on your knees on diving, you're going to get pretty cut up. So we've ordered new sand about 6 inches to top the volleyball court. So I think we're going to see a lot more activity out there. I didn't realize that I put in a few of those at other facilities in my past life, and I noticed it was a different color sand, so we went ahead and made that move. Okay. Next, I believe, is there one more? Yes. Our signage, Mr. Niddickman pointed out, and we had noticed, was weathered and old, and so we installed all new signs at all of our parks. Omero just did that this week. So they're clean, readable, and they're not faded. Okay. So that concludes my report. We're in the middle of an audit, and we'll be bringing that to you probably next month or thereafter. Okay.
Thank you. We'll move into any questions specifically, or we want to move into? Go ahead.
I have one, if you don't mind.
I have one. Go ahead.
All right. So Joe, as to the banking, have you implemented the charge for folks using credit cards?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So there's what's that fee again?
I want to say, is it 3%?
Okay. Yeah. I know that's something we've been looking at, is addressing that shortfall.
Yes.
So, thank you.
On the audit, didn't we have it stipulated that every few years we must change the auditor? Where are we?
We're preparing a bid, and we'll go out to get a formal bid. One of the auditors that I'm asking for a bid is the one that I forget the name of them, that we just looked at for our accounting process, the third one. They're predominantly do auditing, so they will be putting in a bid also.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Joe.
Board member?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Sure. You can ask.
So I guess I want to address this. It wasn't on the agenda, and I don't know where it fits, but I imagine it's to maybe the general manager's discretion or to the board's guidance to the general manager. But I would propose that the general manager waive the fees for the RHA candidate forum that provides access to our residents. Is that an item we can take action on?
I'm afraid not. You'd have to have that on your agenda.
Okay.
Unless the director has the authority to do that pursuant to your existing codes, you'd have to take that up at a notice meeting.
If I may, I don't have that authority, but we can always have them pay, and we can discuss it at our next meeting and do it retroactively if you want it.
What's the fee?
It's $80 an hour, so there's probably about $340 somewhere in there.
Past candidate forums, have we waived?
No.
What was that, Derek?
I asked what was the fee RHA is paying for the candidates forum, and have we waived that fee in the past when we've had candidates forums every couple of years or however they have them?
I did talk to Tarquin, and maybe Ms. Barlow might chime in here, but my reservation, and I'm sure we can talk about it later on, but is a conflict of interest, since we have board members running, and it just seemed like it was a conflict.
I guess I would take the opposite position to that. I think that it's almost, in a sense, if we're charging an entity to come here for a candidate forum that involves, seats on this board, it's incumbent to us to make it the most available, not to restrict it.
It's always been available. The fee has never restricted anybody.
I'm saying
we need to agendize this.
I understand.
Next time.
I just, if it were to be a non-starter, then I would say, well, let's not waste our time putting on an agenda. But anyway, we can move on because this is not proper time in the agenda.
Thank you. Anyways, we do have board member comments if either one of you, Tony, you want to start?
I want to thank Officer Musselman for coming today. I hope to see him more in Rossmoor. Joe, I would like, and I've talked to you offline on this, I would like to get information about, and we've had this in the past, you know, with COVID the last couple of years, we haven't really talked about this much, but I think our community should know numbers of kids at our 4 elementary schools and start times and the you know, the impact of whatever state laws is when it starts. So we just don't have a lot of that information. We've talked about that in the past, and the school board would send a representative, and we could, you know, discuss that, and they would, you know, Sherry Kropp would come and actually tell us, you know, how many out-of-district kids, because we did have a problem years ago with traffic, and it's gotten a little better, but there's a lot of traffic leaving Rossmoor. So, I mean, it's kind of like with the sheriffs, and just, you know, we should just be able to get that information. You know, the number of kids, just all of that, you know, all of that data, I would like to have. I don't know, maybe if we can. I'd love to have a rep from the school board here. They haven't been here in quite some time, correct?
Right.
I mean,
through COVID, yeah.
What's that?
I said, yes, through COVID, we haven't had a lot of, yeah.
I don't know. I think I have a concern about the response times for our law enforcement. We should, you know, seek information and also seek meetings with those who can change that. And, you know, I know the folks, well, my wife does, and friends of mine know the folks that got broken into. And it, you know, it was a big deal. It was a big scare. And again, but we also have other problems in Rossmoor, catalytic converters being stolen, and, you know, compared to other communities, it might not be a lot, but I mean, I think that the very minimum, we should have a deputy in Rossmoor all the time. And if we don't, show me in the contract where it says that they can, you know what I mean? We just need to just talk about it.
We don't even seen the contract.
I know, it's I know, Joe, you were telling me you were gonna reach out to CEO. Okay, so I would love to hear what that meeting, what information you get, or what data we can gain, and just to kind of understand what Rossmoor's minimum standard is. I'd like to know minimum standard of CHP is also. So I think that's it. I'll just make it short and sweet. But it's a big concern with a lot of folks in Rossmoor, especially what just happened to that one family. So I'll let it go. Thanks.
Thank you.
With that, I am excited that the CHP has rolled out that volunteer academy.
I agree.
That's great. Special thanks to Officer Musselman. And next Parks and Facilities meeting is September 20th, next Tuesday. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. I do want to, and with the checks and things like that, I think it's really actually, it's reducing the risk for the district, which I think is really important. Instituting the new credit card fees that we've talked about is just also part of that process of taking care of the district, not in a risk part of it, but also just fiscally responsible. So I think that that's great. So thank you. I did have a question, and I apologize, I didn't ask this offline, but several months ago you talked about an accident that our truck had gotten into, and you had mentioned maybe the need to go to smaller trucks to prevent that from happening. I'm just wondering if we've had any other issues or what your thoughts are regarding that.
No, we are getting some costs on backup cameras. We don't have those on our trucks, and the backup beepers that when the truck's backing up or a car, you can hear the beep, beep, beep. I still think our large truck is too big for our parks. We do use it a lot, but it's a big truck, and even to haul stuff, it's harder to get it over the side of the trucks or even up on the flat bed when we open the trunk up. But it is paid for. So, yeah. It's tough to trade something in right now that's of value. So we're just watching and seeing, and we're being careful. And like I said, we're taking those other measures. The beeper and the backup camera, we're going to add to those trucks.
President Rips, don't we have another vehicle?
We have the little electric vehicle that Mary uses a lot, and that we use a lot for small items, tree limbs and things like that. And then we have the Ranger, which we use predominantly to water the trees. Okay.
But since that time, we haven't had any other additional...
No, we're really watching and limiting the use of that truck on the parks. We're trying to do as much as we can.
I do think that the situations that we're talking about, unfortunately ad nauseum, and now with the response time that came up this past time with the sheriff and even CHP, Mr. Mendoza, I know we met with Supervisor Doe, but perhaps another meeting with him, with the two of us, to really have this conversation. And I do think we need to start pushing it because they all are tied in together. And the fact that, Tony, you mentioned the catalytic converters, I mean, people are kind of understanding. I know that's rampant, but people are understanding that they can come to our community and do these things. But the response time is, it's just unacceptable. And we need to figure out what to do about that. Personally, I like the idea of going to Los Alamitos, but I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I personally want to apologize for not being able to attend the Heroes Luncheon next week. I think it's amazing. I want to say thank you to everybody who serves the community. High holidays are coming up very soon, and I work at a temple, and this is not the time where I have extra time, so I apologize for not being able to attend, but I do want to thank everybody who serves. It's very important, and I really appreciate it. And with that, that's all I have for tonight. General counsel items, if any?
I have nothing for you this evening other than to say thank you so much for having me tonight.
Well, thank you for being here with us. Really appreciate it. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.